having established quorum, we can begin.
All right. Sorry, put my camera on. I'd like to call the meeting to order at, sheesh, what time is it?
6:17.
6:17 p.m. Let's start with the Pledge of Allegiance and the Goethe Pledge. Please stand, place your right hand over your heart. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Casey, could you do the Goethe Pledge?
As a citizen of the world, I will follow Goethe's circle of learning. Curiosity opens my mind, ideas lead to knowledge, responsible choices show respect, cooperation strengthens others, learners are courageous, empathy creates community.
Thank you. And Biggie, would you do the German version?
Sure. Als ein Bürger dieser Welt folge ich dem Kreis des Lernens. Neugierig, ideenreich, respektvoll, kooperativ, mutig, empathisch.
And Naz, would you do us the honors of the Spanish version?
Yes. Como ciudadano del mundo, seguiré el círculo del aprendizaje, creatividad, ideas, respeto, colaboración, valor, empatía.
Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to roll call. Frank,
Present.
Katrin.
Here.
All right, and Sam is not present and Pete is not present. I'd like to make a motion to affirm the board findings pursuant to Government Code Section 54953E. Is there a second?
This is Katrin. I can second.
All in favor? Frank,
Yes.
Katrin?
Yes.
That is a yes for me. I'd like to make a motion to approve the agenda as presented. Is there a second?
I second.
That's Frank. All in favor? Frank,
Yes.
Katrin?
Yes.
That is a yes for me as well. Now, public comment. Casey, do we have anyone for public comments?
The public may comment on any item that is on the agenda or any other item that is in the board's jurisdiction. Members of the public who wish to comment during the board meeting may use the raise hand tool on the Zoom platform. Individual comments will be limited to 3 minutes, and the total time for this purpose shall not exceed 30 minutes per meeting. If an interpreter is needed for comments, they will be translated to English, and the time limit shall be 6 minutes. Individuals may speak 1 time per subject. The Board of Trustees reserves the right to mute or remove a member of the public if comments or actions disrupt the board meeting. Board members are prohibited from responding to or commenting on matters raised by the public that are not on the agenda. And at this time, it looks like there is no public comment.
All right, thank you, Casey. I'd like to make a motion to approve the regular board meeting minutes of August 8th, 2022. All in favor? Frank,
Yes. Don't we need a
Katrin?
second? This is consent. No, we don't. I'm sorry. I apologize.
oh, it's okay. Katrin,
Yes.
that is a yes for me as well. All right, Chris, ED report. See you.
Okay. Thank you. Let me go ahead. Come on, open that up. Sorry about that. All right. So just to get us started, we are now up and running. The last time we met was the week before school started. And so there was a lot of uncertainty and trying to, get all the pieces together. But I'm happy to report we've been able to open up at school. And the important piece about campus is really that there is a kind of a comfort or a happy feel with the kids that kind of wasn't present a year ago when we came back from the at home distance learning. There's really been a much more sense of normalcy on the campus. We obviously did some things, and this is ongoing. I had mentioned it the last time, but we've added new furniture outside and umbrellas. We've been adding shade space. using pop-up tents and trying to and using them umbrellas. We redid our outdoor library that is in daily use by students. It's really great to see it in action, and it just has a good look, and it's comfortable and in a shaded area, and so that's a nice piece. We've definitely added plants and color that took place. We started with at the Shine the School event, but have been adding on bit by bit since, and there's still more to do, but our real goal is to, just make the campus have much more color and appeal. Importantly, we put the privacy screen up in the NYP nutrition area, and that area is used. We now have 6 round tables, all with umbrellas, and about 6 benches that are in that area. So it's a spot that did not, it didn't exist prior to a year ago, and we are just trying to make it our own. The other thing that's new on campus, we have breakfast in the morning that is available to all students at no charge, and it's working out really well. We were concerned, was it going to be problematic in terms of structure and organization and that kind of thing, but the cafeteria folks are there every day, and they serve to anyone who asks, and it's gone really well. We just serve from 7:50 to 8:05 in the morning, and I think it's also helping getting some kids to school a little earlier, which is really kind of a nice thing, because they're getting there early to make sure that they get their breakfast. The other thing that has occurred is our NYP sports program has started. We are up and running. In fact, we have our first games this week. It is definitely learning as we're going along. So we have girls volleyball and boys flag football, and as I said, practices started last week, and we actually start games this week. So we're off and running. I think this is kind of the trial run for soccer, which will be in the spring. We'll have boys soccer and girls soccer in the spring. But we're very excited about that. And we've had a wonderful turnout. Way more than we had thought. In flag football, about 15 boys that have been coming to the practices and getting registered, and at girls volleyball there's about 22 girls, and so we're trying to figure out how we're going to get them all playtime, but we'll figure that out. But we're excited to see that there is great interest, and it's across the grade levels too. We have a good contingency of 6th grade, as well as 7th and 8th graders who are participating. Enrollment. Let's dive right in to the not so pleasant subject. When we spoke last as a board, we thought that we were coming in somewhere around our budgeted number. As it stands right now, we are at 391. So it's 11 more students than we had last year, but it is not at the enrollment projection we had of 426. And so that will have implications. We're going to talk about budget and where that leaves things, and all the changes with that. We'll have a big discussion there, but I wanted to be sure that it was clear. Kindergarten is our most impacted area. As we mentioned before, we did not have a TK roll up from last year, so that we didn't have a class that was already kind of set rolling forward from the previous grade. So we went through the wait list, and unfortunately in that grade level, we just had quite a number of kids who were no-shows, and that we did not get the numbers we expected. But in each grade, and I'll show you the breakdown, there is some in each one. Something on the good side there, 6th grade maintained the 2 full classes we were planning for. Each class has about 24 kids in it. That's a great step up from where we were last year, and so that we're very happy about. And of course, enrollment is an issue that is across Los Angeles and the entire state. We are definitely not alone. So let's take a look at the specifics of what our enrollment of 391 is and take a look at the comparison. You can see where our average class sizes are, which are actually fairly nice numbers. I mean, in terms of for the most classes, around it, an average of 23 per class, but we've got a few that have dropped below that. And as I mentioned, TK is a couple below, but kindergarten is the one where we were expecting to have 50 students and we have 38. So that's an issue. We hope we can catch that up when we have first grade. Usually we have a number of first grade who might join that class. So that's a really important thing, is that we're recruiting not just for kindergarten this year, but also trying to fill that first grade for next year. Second grade was a few down, third, fourth, fifth, the same thing, a couple down. Sixth grade, as I said, we were maybe a few down, but having 2 full classes of 24 is a big improvement from where we were, where we only had 1 class at 6th grade before. 7th grade, we did have a drop there, and I think that was a little bit related to our that we had teacher inconsistency last year with substitutes, and I think that was a factor. Our 8th grade actually went up a little. So we had planned for 18 and we have 20 there, but you can see all totaled, that brings us to the area of 391 is where we stand. So the question is, where did those folks go and why aren't they here? And we did put out our survey, of which we got 22 responses. And just to share, most of the responses that we got, the 2 of the pie graph that's here, the 31% and the 22%, that's 6th and 7th grade students, our families represented there. So a lot of this information gives us a sense of what people who chose somewhere else for middle school at 6th grade or 7th grade. Those are the 2 largest grade levels that we got. The rest are kind of a smattering across. And you can see that most of these folks have been with us for many years. So in a lot of cases, it might have been a 5th grader who did not come to 6th grade. So even though we had good numbers, there's obviously ones that did not do that. And we want to know what's happening there. We did ask what type of school they'll be going to. And I think this is an interesting one, is that most are choosing a public school, not a charter school. So that's the most common, and then private is larger than charter in terms of which schools they're going to, based on and realizing this is only 22 responses, but it does give us a sense of where people are thinking. So an important question that we always ask is, would we recommend GICS to a friend or colleague? And on the scale from 0 to 10, and it's basically the net promoter score question is what this is. And you can see that even though we had comments that gave us a sense of why people left and what they liked, and we asked what do you like and what could be improved, and so we did get some specific answers there, but in general you can see from this chart that the largest answer of the 22 people who turned it in 60%, 59% were 10, the highest, and then the next is 9, and then the next is 8. So 8, 9, and 10, over 90% of the respondents said 8, 9, or 10. We did have a 7, and we did have a 5 that also was listed. But I think that's a good indication that even folks who are leaving us still are putting out a good message. At least they're reporting that to us, that they're giving a good message to others. But this is where it gets a little more interesting. I think what were the reasons people are moving out or not coming? Well, the biggest one actually was a better academic fit. So that is in the area in the green. The second biggest was moving out of the area, and then adding along to that the one next to it at 9.1%, too long of a commute. So those are kind of related. But you can see there's other reasons that people have, keeping children together with a sibling, better social emotional fit, pandemic related reasons, homeschooling. So there's lots of different pieces. And then there's the two questions that were free response, and we analyze that as an administrative team. A lot of times it has personal information where they name a student or that type of thing, but we do review this. And I can tell you that on the positive is, what did you like about Goethe is positive comments about teachers, positive comments about just general great school. We loved our experience here. I mean, those definitely happen. On the one where we get responses as to what could we do to improve, I think there were just a couple of key things that were takeaways from that. And one is building a sense of community. And for those, it was particularly those who had been at kindergarten or maybe first grade, who their only knowledge of the school had been during COVID time. And that was a concern about that they just didn't feel connected as because there just was so limited time on campus and limited activities on campus last year. So, obviously the response to that for us is trying to really reestablish those things this year, and make sure that that's not a takeaway that people have. But that was definitely one of the main comments. And then the other comment that came from the middle school side was the inconsistency with that we had with teaching at the 6th grade level in particular, that we had multiple teachers, and we also had that at the 8th grade level where we had multiple teachers throughout the year. So I think, but it was 6th grade. It was the 6th grade who was giving the response on this. So we're taking a hard look at the responses where they were, while they were mostly positive, there were certainly constructive comments that we can have takeaways from. And I'd like to share what our next step is with outreach, and then kind of pause for questions or comments. Obviously it's not tenable to keep having limited growth. We've been saying it again and again, everything's about enrollment, and growing 11 is not what we had planned for. So the biggest push for us is returning to in-person recruiting. So fairs, there is an LMU school showcase that is coming up in October. Westchester Nursery Co-op. There's Del Rey Day coming up in October, middle school fair. So there's a bunch of things this fall that are in person that we are going to figure out ways to get people to, and have tables out, and really being able to get our face out there physically in the community, which we were not able to do last year. Secondly, a return to on-campus tours. Now, at the very end of the year, this was in May, we had our first on-campus tours. Everything else we had done virtually since then. And a return this year to having regular on-campus tours, as well as doing virtual, is our plan. But we think the on-campus is really the big game changer there. We will continue with our local print advertising that we do from the Argonaut to the Westchester Hometown News to Venice Living to Westchester Living and various ones that are there. And we'll continue our online advertising and group interactions. The things that Nazmia has done with Facebook groups is particularly, we think, important. It's hard to get a hard and fast number on that, but we think that is one of the ways that really does make a difference, and so we're going to be continuing with that. And our intent to enroll forms, which play an important part, obviously, in Prop 39. We're finding out who's meaningfully interested in coming to school and pushing hard to get a collection. We're doing it internally, which we need to do. That's already underway on campus, but it'll also be every part of tour and visits and recruiting fairs pushing forward. So I'll go ahead and stop right there and just pause for questions, comments, and where we are with regard to enrollment and outreach. Yasir, do we have any questions from the board?
Did we lose Yazir?
No,
No,
sorry, I was
he's
trying to
back.
get myself off of mute. I will open it up to questions. Frank?
So how many students did not return overall?
And you have to be a little more specific for us. In what way?
So students who would have rolled over, how many did not return? So we have 22 responses, but how many did not return?
Oh, how many was that? Yeah, this was sent out to all who had been at our school before.
Yeah.
And so the total number, Biggie, you might actually know that number. It was Christiane who sent it.
Yeah, I don't know.
So
the
I'll have to
number.
follow up with getting you that number. But I'm going to say it is probably around that we sent to probably 50, something along that number, 50 or 60.
50 or 60 did not return.
That
So
are
that's could have returned.
Could have returned, and that's a fairly normal number of what surprised us was the ones who didn't at the last minute.
Right.
And that's a lot of those were people who'd never been on campus.
So that the last one I don't. So anyway, so that's about, we had like what, 380. So 380, 20% of the students did not return. Yeah, if it's about 50
I
to
can
60.
get you more
So,
detailed numbers. I don't want to just do it with conjecture.
okay, that was my question.
Katrin?
Chris, do you feel, you and your team, do you feel that you got sufficiently detailed information from the survey from parents? I know you alluded to a couple of things that you learned sort of from the comments section, but just hearing it, and perhaps I lack a frame of reference a little bit, just the numbers that you just presented do sound like a pretty big deal to me in terms of students not returning, even though you say it's pretty normal. And I want to make sure that we really understand the reasons why this is happening. So do you feel like you have enough information, or do you need more details from those not returning families?
It would be nice to have a larger sample. These aren't people who are necessarily tied into wanting to reply because they're already in a different situation. We can send probably one more request without starting to get annoying. But I think that the free response does give us a really some good things to be thinking about. And I do think that they were the two that I mentioned were the key takeaways that I got. So I think that was definitely helpful. I would like a little bit of a broader response level than just 22.
Time for a follow-up question? Is that?
Yeah,
or,
go ahead, Frank.
So do we know like what socioeconomic group has left us predominantly? So like I would like to know, to be specific, was of course without names, you know, we have an indication why people left. But like what is the like who left?
Got it.
Right? We know probably the why to a certain degree, even it's only maybe it's a third of the responses, but I would like to know who, because maybe then between the why and the who, we can draw some conclusions, or at least can deliberate about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can bring that in next month's
and then
information.
Subsequently, let me put this over here. I have it on my other screen here, that I don't have to. I can look directly in the camera. I apologize. And then subsequently, who came? Like we know, let's say these are the people who left, but who also came. And is there a shift in the demographics? Is there a shift in the appeal? Is there a certain group we're talking to? Where are they coming from? So so there is, you know, like if we've lost, let's say we lost 60, we gained 70. Right. So what's the story here? You know, in the analytics, so to speak.
Yeah, I can find out that information.
Yep. Thank you.
Yeah, I think I would just like to highlight like that as a concern. Like I really want to drill down deeper into that survey. So yeah, look forward to the next update.
Okay.
If there's nothing further.
I do, but I just had stopped there because I knew there would be questions. So,
Okay.
But I do have a couple other things that are important. One is that we have submitted the material revision update, but just the end of last week, it was sent back to us with some requests for adjustment. And that we need to resubmit with exact language that was not just in the revision that we gave them, but also in the resolution. If you recall, we did the resolution in August, and it was a directive to me to present that, which we did, but they need to have the exact language that's in that. And they also need to have 2 signatures. So we had just our board president, but they require the board secretary as well. So we will need to go through this at a meeting, and we will need to set up a special meeting to do this and have a chance to kind of talk through the whole piece of material revision as to why we're doing it and what will you know, what the exact language will be needs to come from the board. So when we get to the calendar section, I'm going to suggest September 27th or September 28th for a special meeting at either 5 p.m. or even better at 4:30. But we'll get to that at the calendar section of the meeting. Another update that I wanted to give you guys was regarding our expanded learning opportunities. We are planning for this funding that came in. This is about $245,000 that can be spent over multiple years, and it is all it's the kind of program that doesn't help our bottom line at all, because it's all additional programs that we need to do, but it does help kids. And it's such a large amount of money. I don't want us to walk away from this. And we already put some of this into the budget this year. It's how we're covering the cost of MYP Sports, but it's really upping our game in terms of our aftercare program and being able to offer more things to students and to be able to provide that at a sliding scale for families that are in low socioeconomic levels. So that is, it's a big shift for us, and there's a ton of pieces to this puzzle. So we are still finalizing some of our partnerships to do the extended day and extended year. I think we've got it now pretty well resolved. So we're going to present this in October with the finalized pieces. Some of the things are already in motion. I mentioned MYP Sports and the fact that we have a 9-hour day. We already have that in place. We start our day at 7:50, and extended care goes actually to 6 o'clock, but we're looking at it as the program that we're looking at through 5 o'clock. And we do offer 3 opportunities for food, a breakfast, which I mentioned earlier. We also obviously have lunch each day, but the after school has a program called Supper. All of these are provided through LA Unified, and we have access to that through our cafeteria service. And also enrichment classes are already underway that are run through the extended day program, and it's a pretty nice wide variety of those classes. But the next step for us is how do we really connect that with our families that may not have in the past been able to pay for extended day services or enrichment classes and that type of thing. So we're still working through the details of that and looking forward to bringing that to you in October. And then the last thing that I wish to share with you guys is about.
Before we move on to the academics,
sure.
You know, Yazir, do I have is the time to raise a question?
Of course, go for it.
Yeah. I mean, this is a massive, right? You know, if somebody, you know, needs childcare 5 days a week from 8 to 6, it's a massive value proposition, right? At no cost, so to speak.
Yeah, or sliding cost.
Or sliding cost, or whatever, you know, for the student, for the families of the student, you know, the consumer of the product. And so, you know, how many schools in our neighborhood, you know, and I'm thinking marketing here, offer, you know, a similar program, a similar opportunity. We only, you know, get the street, you know, they're in good hands, but they also have like enrichment programs, you know, they do other activities, you know, which is fantastic. What do we know about our competition?
It's a great question, and I feel like this is new money that came in, and so I can share what I know from executive directors that I talk to, is that basically almost all of them are using and planning to use this money, and it is money that, you know, never existed before. So people are doing exactly what we're doing, is doubling down and kind of tripling down on what is available in their after school offerings. And the other piece is not just the after school, it's extended year. It's 30 days beyond our calendar 180 days. And that is a piece where that's what's been the toughest for us, is figuring out how to do that, because we traditionally have had, in the past couple of years, we've had summer school, but it's only about a 12-day summer school. We do it in June. So we're looking, what could we do to expand and make opportunities available at maybe in the third week of winter break, or during spring break, or during July. And we have to work through these issues on campus with we have to pay for the facilities, and we have to pay for food, and we have to pay for a program, but all of that can be used from this funding. So it is a game changer. You're absolutely right. Do I think it's a marketing tool? To some degree, yes, but is it going to be vastly different than what others are doing? No, I don't think so, because I think this is money that's available across the board, and we are definitely not alone in like going, wow, this is a lot of money. We can do a lot of good things with it. But there's also a lot to structure and organize around it. So I think it's something we can make part of our marketing, but I don't think it's the key, because others are going to be doing the same thing.
Katrin, do you want to ask any more questions about this, or are you good? I will take that as a no. All right, Chris, let's move
Okay.
on.
All right. So the last bit I'd like to talk with everybody about is CASP results. This is the big annual testing. If you recall, we have not given this test since the 2018-19, so pre-pandemic, and this test was given to our students back in May, and May, if you recall, was not our best month in terms of dealing with the pandemic. We had quite a bit of activity on our campus in May, particularly affecting our staffing. And so we survived it, and we got through the tests, and we met all of our minimum expectations, which is 95% taking the test and 95% of every subcategory of student taking the test. But let me not bury the lead here. We have remained consistent with a 2% overall increase in both reading and math compared to 2018-19. In other words, whereas your reading that was announced locally, LA Unified had a 2% drop in reading and a 5% drop in math, and that is expected to be at the state, although the state hasn't released their numbers yet, and that's what I'm reading about everywhere nationally. We didn't actually drop. We actually went up, and there's some interesting things to analyze. But I think part of this is we did have a fast response to our online learning. I think the shift to iReady has been a particularly an important piece in the interventions that it provides. We really worked to re-engage students once they got back on campus, and it was not an easy year last year. We all have attested to that. But the fact that this goes against the state and national trends of learning loss, I think we really need to pause, take a moment, and say, this is good news. This is some really exciting information that we're going to be sharing. And so I'm going to ask Casey to walk through the slide presentation, and I'll need to shift. Let me just escape out of there. And okay. All right. And so Casey, I'm going to turn this over to you. Do you want me? I'll go ahead and move the slides forward for you if that works out. Does that work for you?
Yes, please.
Okay. I'm going to go and view the slideshow.
So Kathy, do
Yeah.
you want us to hold the questions until the end, or how do you wish to proceed in this one?
We could go through, it's chunked by subject area. So it follows the same format as I've done in previous years, where you'll get the overview of the subject area, and then we'll dive down into student groups, and then it'll repeat for English language arts. And then we're also sharing the science test result data, which is new to share with you guys at the board level. So we can maybe after each subject area, pause and do questions.
Sounds good.
And one thing to add, this is preliminary information because the state hasn't actually released the overall picture for the state. And so we were able to capture this information because of the Unified Insights program that we have been building up. We were able to take the raw data of our student scores, and that's what we're presenting right now. So this is brought to you by Unified Insights. Casey, go ahead.
Okay. Can you go to the first?
Yep.
So this is just the overview of each of the subject areas that are tested. For English language arts and math, that's all students in grades 3 through 8 for us. But for science, we're only testing our 5th grade and our 8th grade students. So it's a much smaller number of students who are tested. This graph here shows the passing rate comparison between 2018-19, which is that blue bar that you see, and then the 2021-22, which is the orange bar. So as Chris already shared, we see a little bit of an increase from 2018-19 through 21-22, even though it's been several years since we took the test between those time periods, and we all went to distance learning and then came back in hybrid and now the full return to school. So this shows the percentage of students who either met or exceeded the expectations for their grade level in ELA, which is your reading, math, and then science. And now looking into math more in detail, again, this is the comparison between when we last tested students in 2018-19 before the pandemic, and then last year in 2021-22. So the blue at the top is the percentage of students, and this is school-wide, so 3rd through 8th grade, who exceeded standards. You can see that's very, very similar. We had 2% increase there. Then the green is the percent of students who met standards, so 1% increase in those numbers. And then yellow is standard nearly meeting, so we had a drop of 4% there, which is good. And then the standard not met is the red. You can see we had 2% more students in that standard not met this year than in the 2018-19. So that's a group that we really want to look at to see who was it that was maybe meeting or nearly meeting that might have dropped down to standard not meeting over the last couple of years. Then when we break down by grade level, again, the blue is the 2018-19 school year, and then the orange is the 2021-22. You can see we only have that comparison data for 3rd grade, 4th grade, and 5th grade. That's because in 2018-19, we did not have our middle school students, so they weren't taking the test then because they weren't enrolled at our school. So for 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, we only have last year's data. You can see from 2018-19 that from 3rd grade to 4th grade to 5th grade, we were having an increase there, but now we kind of have the opposite in this 2021-22 data. So our 3rd graders actually did better by a lot than they did in the 2018-19 school year, whereas 4th grade was pretty similar, just a short increase. But then 5th grade, we saw that decline. If we're thinking about the last couple of years between 2018-19 and 2021-22, these 5th graders would have been in 3rd and 4th grade, really working on their multiplication skills, their division skills, all of those foundational but higher level math skills that they really need in order to be successful in 5th grade. They were doing those either in distance learning or in the hybrid model. So that is plays a role in what has happened here in 5th grade. You can see the same with that 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. So we don't have that comparison data, but those are not percentages in terms of passing rates. that we would be happy with. We want to increase those by a lot. And again, these are those kids who were in those upper elementary grades during the pandemic. One of the things, this is just an aside, that we're noticing is that in general, students who work well independently seem to continue on with that consistent growth, even through distance learning and returning to hybrid. But students who either did better with someone working with them or having interaction with other people, having those discussions, getting to use models in their hands, those students are where we're seeing a bigger impact of that distance learning and hybrid model, because they weren't in class every single day. Yeah, you want to go to the next. Then when we break it down by our race and ethnicity, again, we see similar trends from 2018-19 to 2021-22, with most of our student groups making some growth. You can see with our Asian student group and with the Hispanic or Latino, there was a slight decrease from 2018-19 to 2021-22. Something to note, our Asian student group is a very small number. That's only about 13 students, 10 students in 2018-19. So any shifting in terms of 1 or 2 students makes a big difference in the percentage there. And also our Black or African American student group is our second smallest student group that we have. White, Hispanic, or Latino, and students of 2 or more races are our largest student groups. And I'll pause there, see if there are any questions related specifically to the, oh, actually, sorry, there's one more, Chris, can you go forward? So then looking at our special education group, in 2018-19, we actually did not have any students in grades 3, 4, or 5 who were tested. And so there is no comparison data. And again, we didn't have the middle school for those years. So this just shows our students who were in 4th grade this last year, 5th grade, and then 8th grade. So special ed definitely, when we're looking at comparison with our other student groups, is an area of focus for us for providing more differentiation and support for students to achieve on this test, but also to master those grade level standards. Our English learners did really well in those upper elementary grades. You can see we're in the majority of students who are passing or meeting or exceeding expectations. And again, big change in 3rd grade and 4th grade from the 2018-19 year to the 2021-22 year. But again, you see that drop for 5th through 8th grade in comparison to 3rd and 4th grade when you're looking at this last year's data. And I'll pause there for questions about math in particular.
Frank and Katrin.
So just a comment, I seem to recall that 18, 19, is it 19? Yeah, wasn't our strongest year when it comes to academic performance. As a baseline, I think we had higher, better performing years. So, although the spread, has marginally widened between what's commonly observed in public school areas, between a 5% drop and we grew by 2%. We grew not on our favorite level. Maybe it's too much of a conclusion I'm drawing here. But and then it would be also interesting to see, and that's one comment. The second comment is, it needs to, it would be interesting to see how many students overall. Are these always the same students as they grow through the classes, right? Is it like, so is it, for example, is it a Max, a Fritz, a Paul, right, who always are not making the class grade? Is it always the same cohort of students who are not making the academic progress year over year, or is that individual cohort growing or is it shrinking, right? So, because, if like on average 70% of the school is making it, so it's 210 students of the 300, of the 350 we had, are kind of making grade, the rest isn't. So what's the, you know, so there is a deeper, probably a deeper analysis again. Who is this group? Are this always the same students year over year who are not making it? So somewhere along those lines. These are just observations.
Yeah, so this data here shows students, any student who was tested with us in 2018-19, and then any student who tested with us in 2021-22. So it's not necessarily following those cohorts as they go through. It's looking at third graders in 2018-19 versus third graders in 2021-22. But that would, when looking at that cohort data, definitely shows us who is consistently underperforming where we would like them to be and needing more support year after year, rather than looking at this, which shows third grade at two different moments in time. So two different groups of students and potentially two different teachers, depending on the staffing in those years.
And so, I mean, the worst case scenario from a public relation perspective, if these are like students identified as special needs, right? Or of minority group, which are not performing, right? And if this is like, if we can catch them and bring them up to speed through the cohorts over between the, 8-year cycle, I think, then is the argument, like, how do we treat those kids, right?
Yeah.
Right.
And
So,
I think, oh, go ahead, Chris.
I was just going to interject. Also, it is something that we can look at over time. It's just that the gap between of the COVID 2-year gap, and this is something that all schools are facing because the state is only recognizing 2018-19 as a year to look at. So 1920 and 1921, 1920 and 2021 are not being reviewed, but we can take a look at all students who took the test and are still at our school. It just doesn't yield us much information this time because of that gap, but in future years it will, and it'll help us to show that. Just so that
right,
that's something.
Sorry to interrupt, but we have like the intervention program to iReady, right? And so the iReady intervention program, should yield. If the student, right, if the student is identified as a, not meeting expectations in second grade and then in third grade, then iReady comes in, right? And so what is how do we catch this and how do we improve that kid, right? Is that and like what's in that cohort? How many is off the 200 of the 150 students not meeting expectations, right? How many are with us for a long period of time? What is their background, and how can we help those kids to get better? I think the data will probably show us, or like at least the names for the educators, right?
Mm-hmm.
And maybe they can benefit. Let's say it's a socioeconomical background issue, and these kids just don't get the support at home. Maybe that's what like the ELO program will align those with them and target those kids specifically in order to get them up to speed.
Mm-hmm. And Frank, also you mentioned iReady, but that also is really super helpful with our teachers we saw over the last year in really identifying who those kids were, because we didn't have their CASP testing last year, but we would have their initial iReady placement. And then we can watch as they go throughout the year. Are they hitting the goals that they're expected to? Are we seeing the growth that we need? Or are they kind of stuck and standing still and we need to do something differently for them? That data is much more easily accessible and a lot more user-friendly than the CASP data in terms of tracking students throughout the year and giving them actionable supports that we can then adjust as we go throughout the year. So it's this combination of, now that we have the state testing results again, which is super powerful and important to look at, and then looking at our individual classes and our student groups and who's getting what support and when, and how are we organizing that. When I go through all the data, I'll share what it is that we've got in place again this year and what we're doing to help support those kids that we've identified as not being at the level that we would expect them to be at for their grade. Any other comments or questions before I dive into ELA?
Could I, you know what, I'll just wait until the whole presentation. Thank you, Casey. Katrin, do you have any other questions about math?
Not specifically about math, about the entire data set. Should I hold off for now?
I was gonna do the same thing, yeah. That's okay.
Okay, all right.
Cool. Go ahead, Casey.
So then reading, we actually had a bigger increase overall than in math. Our students did much better this last year than they did in 2018-19. But again, you can see pretty comparable from the 2018-19 year with increases into the 2021-22 year. Can you go to the next slide, Chris? And then looking at our grade level, you can see, especially in the older grades, we're seeing that growth, whereas in math, we saw a little bit of a dip and then staying kind of low. We're seeing more of that growth throughout the years from the 21-22 data, which is that orange bar. But again, our third grade group from 2018-19 compared with our third grade group from last year, they consistently did a higher percentage of students who were meeting or exceeding those expectations in both language arts and math. And then looking at race and ethnicity, again, we see really similar trends with math. And interestingly, so we see our Hispanic and Latino group, they had a considerable drop from 2018-19 to 2021-22. Oftentimes, students in the Hispanic or Latino group might also be in our English learner group. But when we look at that, you'll see a much bigger increase with our English learners on their language arts testing. So there's not a huge correlation there between the Hispanic or Latino student group and then how our English learners did on their reading portion of the CASP. But you can see much bigger growth, especially for our Black or African American students. And then we saw it with math. And then looking at special education and our English learners. Again, in 2018-19, we had no students who were in special ed who took the test in third, fourth, or fifth grade. So you're just looking at individual grade levels there from the 2021-22 school year. So again, students performed much better on the ELA portion of the CASP than they did on the math portion. And you can see similar with our English learners, much higher performance in reading than on the math section. And then science, which we had not previously presented to the board, but since we have the unified insights and are able to easily get this data more easily than we had previously, and we wanted to share that with you. So again, remember, science is only for our 5th and 8th grade classes. So that was one small class of 8th grade last year, and then 3 classes of 5th grade. So you can see pretty comparable from the 2018-19 to the 2021-22 school year, with fewer students who are in that not meeting and more students in the meeting sections than in 2018-19. But again, if you look overall at those percentages, that's not nearly as many students as we want to see who are meeting or exceeding standards in science. So looking at our science curriculum and our science instruction and our support for students in science, coupled with what math skills, what reading skills, what language skills do students need in order to access that content, is an area of focus for us this year. And then again, comparing the passing rates. So we only have 5th grade and 8th grade. And again, in 8th grade, in 2018-19, we did not have, but an increase in our 5th grade group from 48 to 52%, and then 50% of our 8th graders. And then breaking it down by race and ethnicity, again, we see similar trends as with the math and the language arts in terms of which of our student groups had higher or lower percentages of students who were passing the test. So again, this just solidifies for us that our students who are Black or African American, our students who are Hispanic or Latino, really need more focused support in math, language arts, and science.
And the one thing I'd just give a caveat on this is with 5th and 8th grade, because it is a very small number, and last year's 8th grade was only 16 students. This is, a shift can be, by 10% can be one student or 2 students. So just keep that in mind in looking at these results.
Yeah, the Asian student group, I believe, was only 3 kids. If you can go to the next one. And then looking at special education and English learners, again, following similar similar trends as what we saw for math and language arts. So in line with the overall, but still nowhere where we would want to see for our students in terms of the percentage of them passing standards for science.
Okay.
And so that's the CASP data. Chris, maybe do you want to go to that first slide that shows the passing rates for all 3 subject areas for, yeah. Okay.
I will open it up starting with Katrin. Go ahead.
Is here. First and foremost, I think that we as the board oftentimes pick on things that aren't going great, but I also want to mention and acknowledge that a lot of the data is moving or the results are moving in the right direction, right, in a lot of what you've presented. So I just wanted to acknowledge that before going sort of deeper. And I wanted to circle back to our discussion earlier around families and students leaving Goethe and our task to sort of come back with a demographic and socioeconomic and national origin kind of breakdown of the data. And I think that we can look at these 2 data sets a little bit in combination for an overall analysis as to who we're probably not serving as well as we could. Right, so one group are the students whose parents decide that perhaps another school is a better academic fit. 30% that was non-negligible, right? That was a substantial part of the group of students that did not return to Goethe. And the other bit is if we look at students who are not performing academically at the level they probably could perform. So zoning in on those populations, how can we serve them better would be my question.
So what we've really been trying to do is look at what are the interventions and supports that we've been providing in the past, and how effective are those, and do they need to be adjusted? One of the things that we've seen over and over and over again as we've gone through distance learning, but especially when we returned for hybrid and then full-time, is there's been a huge impact on students' social and emotional well-being going through distance learning and the pandemic and all of the different experiences that our students have had. When we came back from hybrid, things were still really different, and it felt really different, and the kids knew it felt really different. They had really tiny groups. Everyone was very excited to be back together, but it was very on a small scale in terms of what a regular school year is. Then last year, we were all back all together full day, but it also felt like a very different type of a year because we weren't mixing our students. We weren't able to do our cross-grade collaborations and mentoring that we normally do. We weren't able to do the field trips and lots of other engaging activities that we normally do because of our increased health procedures and protocols. And also with all of our health protocols in place, it just felt very different from a regular year. So there was a lot of focus on helping students get readjusted to being in the classroom with other people, but now with all of these new boundaries that we have in place. And so they're starting to work on those social skills again, but it was very structured and very different from a typical year. Now this year, we're back in seemingly a regular feeling year. We don't have the, temperature checks and health screenings. We're not doing weekly testing. We can play together again across our classes and across our grades. We can have assemblies like we're having tomorrow. So it's feeling a lot more normal than it has in the last couple of years. But what we're seeing is that the kids are still dealing with a lot of emotional and mental and social challenges that they're still processing from being out of school for so long, from the different experiences they may have had with their families during the last several years of the pandemic. And so we're having kids who the focus for them is the people that are around me, and I want to re-engage with them. I'm having trouble doing that. I don't know how to do that. So the need for more time to sit and talk with students, whether that's helping them problem solve together or them just wanting to share what's going on, that has really been massive this year. More so than in any year pre-COVID, in my experience. And so that really, you can't get to the academics the way you really need to until those needs of those kids are met. And so we have kind of these two different groups. I talked about the students who work really well independently, and those ones during distance learning were able to stay on track and help to monitor themselves. We also have families who are able to provide different types of experiences for their kids during distance learning to help maybe give them that tutoring support if they needed it. And then we have a lot of students who either don't work well individually or independently, or their families weren't able to provide additional support out of what we could do as a school. So that gap has really intensified. So even though it's all feeling like we're back here, it's back to normal with school, it really isn't. So the type of support that we're providing for our kids has to change. So we've continued with the things that we implemented last year that we found really helpful, which are the instructional assistant positions that are focused specifically for intervention and also for our English learner support. So those two positions are still in place and they're working with students. We also had an intervention teacher who we hired last year to do part-time intervention support in the primary grades. The results from that were really positive, and so we've continued with that role again this year. Another really big piece that we're taking on this year is looking at multi-tiered systems of support for our kids. So Chris, we've talked about it lots of times before, but there's a huge grant funding available for schools across the state to really look at the types of support systems they have in place for kids. But it's looking at students as a whole child, which as an IB school, we're always wanting to do and focusing on. So that's looking at their academic needs, their behavioral needs, but also their social, emotional learning and well-being needs as well. So what we're in the process of right now, which we've started this year, is we have assigned kind of like a mentor coach who's helping our school work through different trainings. It's a 2-year training plan where we have every month a different focus that we're looking at. And then we get the training pieces from the state. And then as a staff, we'll work together to think about what have we learned in this training? What's the reality of our school? So we're doing analysis of the systems and the processes and the protocols in place, as well as looking at our student data, not just the academic data, but also data on how many referrals we're having for students coming to the office, how many of those referrals are for behavioral needs versus social emotional needs. So we're tracking all of that and analyzing that throughout the year. And so we'll do that several times throughout the year to just kind of take a pulse of where is our school in this process of refining and implementing better systems for our kids. So then each month we'll work as a staff and we'll collaborate to look at what did we learn in the training, what is the reality of our school, and then what are our next steps. What are we going to do either with our kids in our classes or school-wide? What systems do we need to adjust to better fit these needs? So it's a really huge training program that we're going through that we're really excited for, because to have the time and the support and the resources to really look at these different systems hasn't really been in place before. So the fact that the state has made this a priority is really, really wonderful. So that's something we're just starting on. We had our first training full staff, but I am meeting monthly with the coach mentor prior to all of our staff meetings to make sure that we understand the data that we're going to go through, the information that we need, so we're ready for those training sessions throughout the year. We also have continued having our SEL consultant, who's been Miss Chris Massey Rhodes. In fact, she just was on campus today. She has a specific day that she comes onto campus every week, but we're seeing the need for even more support for students than just the single day that we've had, which has been the kind of schedule for her for the last several years and has worked really well. But again, our students just need more time to process, more time to work through things, more time to talk to each other with an adult who's helping them to guide that situation. The kids are really hungry for that support and are coming up to me or Miss Chris or Miss Trong or any of their teachers and asking, hey, can we talk about this together? So it's finding that balance of meeting their social and emotional needs, which are much higher than they've ever been before, while also creating that time and that system of support to continue to push them academically as well. We talked earlier about iReady, and so that data we're continuing to use, and students are practicing their individual pathways regularly throughout the week. And that has really helped to support students where they are, while then during their designated math or language arts time, they also have differentiation from their teacher or from the aides who are coming in with the content that they're working on at that moment. And am I forgetting anything else? Oh, we also have continued with extending our counseling services to students outside of special education. So any families who feel like their students might benefit from meeting with a counselor, we've got the availability to support them with school counseling as well.
All right, Frank, any other questions or comments?
Comments. Let me go on video here for a second. So I think you need to, we need to have that document. There's a lot going on, a lot of positive things going on, like, making the educational piece better. But, I think as a school, and I'm doing a lot of data analytics recently, so I apologize for being so mechanical about this. But I think we need to ask ourselves, where do we stand, in relationship to other when it comes to passing rates, right? Is 2/3 a good number we want to hit, or what's an achievable goal, given the demographics, right? We have to deal with, what our peers do. If you do a peer comparison, peer benchmarking or something like that, where do others stand, school-wide? And then, what can we do with our demographics, with our makeup of the student body, or the people we're telling what is actually achievable? Is 2/3 a good number, or should it be higher? That's a question we need to ask us. I think we need to ask ourselves as a school, and what do we need to do there? Mm-hmm. And then the second piece of it is, historically, our math programs are, and students who graduated from Goethe, they are very well versed in in their social emotional learning and stuff like that, but we're underachieving a little bit, and our students have sometimes, when they go to other schools, have catch up to do. Do we need somebody, on an outside consulting basis, who's looking at our curriculum in math and science, like a dean of science, so to speak, who is saying, okay, maybe that's something which we need to, why is it lower than ELA, right? We're doing a great job. If that's the number we benchmark we want to hit, then we're doing a better job in ELA than we do in math and science. So what do we need to do in order to get the math and science math and science better results. Maybe we do need a subject matter expert who's coming in part-time or full-time to look at this and to look at the curriculum and the staging and the academic program to improve it. I don't know. It's just an observation. That's it. Thank you.
Chris and Casey, any thoughts?
But I do think one of the things that we did in this school year is the addition of having Angel Trong be as our IB coordinator. I know that sounds like just focusing on the IB piece of it, but she looks at and helps support across all curriculum areas. And so I know that's not like outside expertise, but it's time that we've not had in many years, 5 or 6 years, where we've had someone fully out of the classroom who is a support. So I'm hoping that we can rely on that to some degree this year to help us move in that direction. I know it was a bit of a rhetorical question, but is 2/3 the right number? No. we definitely want it to go up, but we can look at some comparables around our area. I've done a little bit of unofficial digging, and I think we are at a comparable level to many of the schools that we're kind of competing with, and we're far above ones that we're not really competing with. But I think it's important that we have that. So we'll try to get more detail once the state information is public.
So I mean, like if you tie it into the people who leave, right, and leave, and for the reasons they leave, and like you do a little bit like what is it like what is it to keep the it all it's all intertwined and correlated. Are the people leaving because of this? Do we need so what else can we do? In order to keep the people and and to get the numbers up. It's just thought. Like I have no answer. I'm not an educator, so I apologize for those very rough observation.
Okay.
Yeah. Well,
So does that Katrin, do you have any other follow-ups, or can we move on?
No follow-ups. Thank you.
Okay. Yes, that was very exhaustive. Thank you, Chris. Shall we move on to the next item?
Okay.
Oh, Chris, I'm getting close. I have a hard stop at 8:15, so if we can move through it a little faster, I'd appreciate it.
Okay, then we can try. We do not have a closed session, so that's in our favor. Okay, so we are now moving forward to our Finance Committee report. There are a couple different pieces to the Finance Committee. The first of which is the approval of our financials for June 2022. And
I move.
I'll second. All in, sorry, discuss. Chris, you want to take it?
yeah, and I'm going to pass this along to Ryan if he can kind of step us through. Let me see if I can share. Hold on 1 second. Ryan, are you there with us?
I'm here.
Yay, thank you. Okay. Where's my Dropbox? There we go. Okay. All right, so make that. All right, Ryan.
Sure. These are our June financials. These are our internally prepared, unaudited financials for the fiscal year 21-22. I'll start with enrollment. So just as a reminder, we were under enrolled from our original budget plan of 424 for the year. We stayed constant at around 380 and maintained an average daily attendance percentage of around 94%. It's less than what you guys normally get. However, I didn't want to take anything away from you because it was still better than what I've seen at other schools this year, due to the COVID-19 pandemic and quarantines and families taking their kids out. I think your independent study program really did its job. So although our average daily attendance percentage was low, had it not been for the independent study for kids who were, missing, would have been even lower. So 94.2% through month 10. On the income statement side, Chris, if you scroll down, because we were under enrolled for the year, that does have a impact on our funding. So our local control funding formula was under by about 291,000. And that's worth talking about because the governor passed a hold harmless proposal for schools to be able to recoup some of that money that they lost because of the pandemic. And at this point in time, for the June financials that we are presenting to you today, it does not include hold harmless revenue. And that's money that we believe should come back into our 21-22 model as an audit adjustment. It wasn't presented for year end because of the guidance from the CDE as well as LAUSD saying that we should not accrue for this money. The reasoning behind that was they had determined that because it's taking over 6 months for that funding to come in, that we can accrue it. But very recently, the auditors had changed their stance and said that we should accrue some of that money. So as of now, what has been reported is a net loss of $228,000. We should be getting about $160,000 or so back through a hold harmless. But we don't have that as of now reflected in these financials. Moving on, and I'll answer questions after. State revenue, I wanted to point out, it looks like it's lower for the year, but it's actually not. It just has to do with the reporting of one-time funding through our ELO grant. It's not lost money. The big change in our funding had to do with the LCFF. Looking at expenditures, we had been realizing savings in certificated salaries all year due to open positions. We didn't end up filling our originally budgeted RSP / special education coordinator. Instead, we outsourced for that. So while we see savings in certificated salaries, you do see increased operating expenditures of $275,000. That's not all for the special education teacher, but I did want to point out that, the majority of these savings are offset by outsourced support. On the benefit side, we realized savings of $119,000 for the year. And student supplies, $119,000 for the year. The majority of this all has to do with timing of stimulus funding, and the big savings in supplies had to do with how we were able to administer our nutrition program due to this this pandemic. We had not been able to operate the way we had in the past. So it generated us some savings in our nutrition program, which is where the student supplies come in. The big piece to point out as far as net income goes is that we realized rent expense of about $300,000 more than we should have for this fiscal year. And the big reasoning behind that is realizing the entirety of the settlement agreement from LAUSD for over allocation. And that was a $324,000 hit to the budget. So I just wanted to point that out. I know we had discussed it in previous meetings. Looking at cash, cash is strong at year end. We ended with 1.8 million with a $693,000 receivable at the end of the year. So that concludes the dashboard presentation.
Oops. There we go.
You can zoom out a little bit, Chris. I
Yeah.
appreciate it. Thank you.
There we go. This check register was reviewed closely by the Finance Committee as well.
I will open it up to questions as we review this. Frank, questions, comments?
Nope.
Katrin?
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
Any questions or comments about the financials for June 2022?
Not from me.
All right, then let's move on to the vote. All in favor to approve the financials? Frank?
Yes.
Katrin?
Yes.
That is a yes for me. Moving on to approve the 2021-2022 unaudited actuals. I'd like to make a motion. Is there a second?
A second.
That's from Frank. Go ahead, Chris.
This is that same information put in a different format that we have to submit to LA County. And I can assure that the Finance Committee did a check to make sure that these numbers correlate. And we did a spot check on that, that these numbers correlate directly to the end of year June financials that we just reviewed. And Ryan, anything you want to add with regard to the unaudited actuals?
No, just a reminder that LAUSD does ask for the meeting minutes where the unaudited actual report is approved. So we do need to break it out as separate, although it is in fact the June financial presentation.
And there under C, there's the 227,000 that is the net loss that hits the same as the other.
Okay. All in favor to approve the unaudited actuals? Frank?
Yes.
Katrin? She might be trying to undo the mute. Katrin, do you approve the 2021-2022 unaudited actuals? There we go.
Yes.
All right, excellent. And that is a yes for me. Moving on to the budget adjustment discussion. Go ahead, Chris.
Sure. I'm going to go ahead and read the statement I gave to all the board members, just so it's in the record. But for the budget discussion, in June, the board approved the 22-23 budget. But in July, the state approved their budget, which included a 7.2% increase, estimated at about 118,000 for base funding and 24,000 for supplemental funding, a total of 142,000. In LCFF funding, which was over what we had budgeted. So that was money to the good, about 142,000. New funding opportunities were also included in the budget trailer bills, including an art music instructional supplies grant that totals 244,874, and a learning recovery grant total of 343,245. Interestingly, these can be used over multiple years, so they do not need to be spent all in one year, thankfully. the state budget also included the hold harmless funding that Ryan was referring to. It's about approximately 160,000, and we're still awaiting that auditor direction as to where to apply this. So this is 160,000 to the good that's floating out there for us. So there's two things. We just did the unaudited actuals. So the end of year accounting shows that we're at a negative balance of 227, which we just looked at. This negative funding does not include the hold harmless funds. As recommended by the Finance Committee and directed by the board, the unaudited actuals include the entire expenditures of the 324,000 for the overallocation for past year's penalties. It also includes 146,000 for the overallocation penalty that was assessed for 21-22. So because of the 324K penalty is for years prior to 21-22, it's important to note that without this prior year expenditure, we would be really at a positive of 96,154 for 2021. And if the hold harmless is recognized in 2021, that number would increase to approximately 256,000 to the good. So I realize this is big numbers and big swings, but you know, it's important that we look at the whole picture. So what does this mean for our budget moving forward? In 22-23, we have we're expecting to provide a budget revision in October that reflects the new funding sources. It will also reflect the enrollment of 391 students, which is down from 426. With these factors considered, we are currently showing a positive projected ending balance of approximately 28,000, and Ryan will share that with you in a moment. This was accomplished with the additional 142,000 in LCFF funding that I mentioned just before, and the designation for the use of 175,000 in the new state funds that came in. You put those two together, and it balances out our lack of enrollment for this year. The Finance Committee recommended that the board have an opportunity to review this information in September and then make a budget adjustment in October. So we didn't want to rush anything. We wanted people to have time. We also want to make sure that our number, we can track our enrollment and know exactly where we're at. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ryan. If you could tell us and kind of walk us through the update on or the budget revision or budget forecast for 22-23. Ryan?
Yeah. So the main thing that this budget forecast at this point in time has is just the additional funding from the governor's proposal that impacts our LCFF to the good. So you can see, well, actually, Chris, we had additional funding from the governor's proposal. However, we lowered down our enrollment from 426 students to 391. So we're under enrolled by 35 kids to start this school year off. So while that would be a revenue loss of over $350,000, because we had more funding to start the year off with through LCFF than we originally planned, the revenue loss is only $183,000 from LCFF. So the main thing, I guess, Dr. Jones, is because of the additional LCFF funding, we are able to, withstand the lower enrollment for this school year without having to make any cuts to the program.
And related to that, the numbers and the way that with the enrollment drop hits, there is no like classrooms that could be combined or anything like that, which would potentially eliminate a position or something to that effect. Really, there's no opportunity in the current year, nor would I want to recommend that. We made those hard decisions going into the year, particularly affecting fifth grade, where we did have to collapse a class. But where we stand currently in looking at this is
Dr. Jones, I'm sorry, before you move it past, I did want to point out the
sure.
state. You can scroll down a little bit. I just wanted to point a little bit more. I wanted to show the variance in other state revenue. You see that 175,000, remember, you were tapping into new funding, the Arts and Music Block Grant here, as well as the Learning Recovery Block Grant. So I did want to point out, in addition to the governor's LCFF money, we also have additional funding that was, able to be applied to this budget model for next year.
Right.
I believe your summary before going into this identified those funding sources.
Exactly. So we have those on record.
Frank, any questions, comments?
No, I have no comments nor either questions. I've seen this already.
Katrin?
No questions or comments from me either.
All right, Chris, so is that going to be in our meeting in October that we're going to do the adjustment?
Yeah, so we're going to take this is just for discussion and so that we know and where things are at. And we'll see if there might be some little adjustments that we make, but our goal is to present a balanced budget for projection for the end of the year. We're not trying to spend down all of the multi-year one-time funding. And of course, LCFF funding is ongoing. So that's good. We don't have to worry about that running out, but we don't want to overspend some of those other funds. We're going to just spend what we need to do to make sure we break even for at the end of the year. That's what we're shooting for.
All right, thank you, Chris. Moving on, I'd like to make a motion to approve Gerlinda O'Neill as staff member on the Finance Committee. Is there a second?
I second.
All in favor, Frank?
Yes.
Katrin? Give her a sec again. Katrin, approve Gerlinda as staff member on the Finance Committee.
Keeps going back and forth.
I'm sorry, I'm having some connectivity right now. I apologize.
We can barely hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. Video is just right now. I apologize.
All right. That's a yes from Katrin.
Thank you.
Moving on. Approval of the ED's focus area and deliverables. I'd like to make a motion. Is there a second?
I second.
All right, Chris, go for it.
All right. Thank you. And the areas that I'm looking at that I really want to get us focused on, I'm going to go through them really quickly. But I'm keeping in mind that I am on a 60% contract. So there's not quite as much time in the week to get things that I would like to get done. But in student achievement, to finalize, now that we've got Unified Insights ready and going, is to finalize what measures beyond iReady and CASP do we want to look at. And we are almost to the point where we're getting our German A1 and A2 and B2 information into the system. So that's good. But I want to finalize a core set of 3 to 5 key data points. In other words, what should the board care most about? And so this is a conversation that I want the board to have in the next month or so with regard to what do they really want to track? And is it looking at CASP, which is kind of a good big picture because that's the public one. And what specific data points and what other achievement measures do you want to look at? I put the number 3 to 5 because I don't want us to get overwhelmed with too much data. And I think this was a point that Pete had made, that we really want to focus on a few key things. So I'm not tied to those numbers that we might have 5, might have 6, might even have 7, but I think we want to make sure we're being focused. And that's where I want to go with data. For marketing and outreach, coordinating with the admin team to increase our school tour attendance. This past year, we had school tour attendance was 145 families, 94 of which were virtual and 51 were in person. We only had in person at the end of the year, so I expect to see at least a 20% increase over those numbers. We will be offering both virtual and in person, but we want to see that that number greater so that we have a larger number of folks in our lottery and post lottery. I want to work with the admin team to make that our efforts at recruiting diverse student populations, and like to see a 3% growth there. Implementing online registration, that's something the board has been asking for. We already have the pieces in place for that, and we're launching it with our in-home returning families, and we'll be doing it for new families moving forward. So that will be happening. We are going to, under site expansion, continue to work with Red Hook Capital's partners and exploring viable options for site expansion, either financing a new facility or either a long-term lease or a purchase of property, and presenting to the board at least 3 viable options this year of what might be available. The tough part about this is our enrollment not coming in at where we wanted it puts us at a disadvantage in terms of where the West Side market is. But we are going to push forward and see what we can do. The next one is prepare for the board consideration material revision. And so that's what the special meeting will be about, pushing that forward. School finance, we need to have a multi-year use for those new state funding programs that we were just talking about. And so that'll be a part of the budget and financing this year. Under organizational development, we're going to publicize and focus on a timeline of action steps under the new strategic plan. So that is will be underway this year, and guide our admin team through new roles and responsibilities. We have the addition of Angel as our IB coordinator, who's full-time and is doing amazing help for us. But we need to focus on support with special education, student behavior systems, and particularly the delegation of duties to support staff. So that's what we'll be focusing on. And then the final one, support the recruitment of at least 1 new board member by March 2023. We've been kind of in a holding pattern on this, and I'd like to see us move forward if we're able to find the right person. So any questions about or comments with regard to focus areas and deliverables?
Just as a preamble, Frank and Katrin, I reviewed this with Chris prior. So thank you, Chris, for making those changes. Frank, questions, comments?
Not really, except, just one comment or just recommendation. There is a podcast. It's called Life Examined on KCRW. It's always on Saturday. There is one about gamification and data mining and the principles of it. And so I encourage just a comment, if you have a spare moment. It's educational, and what's behind it. So that's the only comment I have.
Katrin?
I think these are all, of course, very relevant deliverables and focus areas. I do think that I would like to specifically also, again, dive and prioritize into the academic excellence aspect of our focus areas and deliverables. I feel like that is sort of at the root of a lot of things. If we don't have the academic excellence that we strive to have, and I'm not saying we don't, but then enrollment won't come, then many things as a consequence won't happen. So for me, I think that is a priority that especially stands out.
Katrin, may I ask you, so do you think from a data set standpoint, like his first point about getting those iReady reports, you think that would be sufficient to get you that information?
I'm not sure.
Chris, do you want to talk about that for a minute?
Katrin, what are you looking for in particular to measure how we're doing academically? I agree. I fully agree with you, and I can assure you. I know Biggie is nodding her head vigorously because she's said this many times at our meetings. Exactly what you just said. How can we measure exactly what you're talking about? And it may not be right this minute, but that's the conversation about this bullet point of like, how do I think we're all in agreement. We want to up the ante, but how do we measure? What are the things we want to measure? I guess is the question that I have. And if you have a thought on that, or if you want to ponder it, and we'll bring it up when we dive into this bullet point.
Yeah, I think it's a hard thing for me to answer spontaneously
Yeah.
right at this moment. I think that perhaps it's not so much about getting additional or new data as it is to, like you said, to implement something for continuous monitoring. If you're I mean, you're getting data through the past, right? Getting data. Already you're getting data. Exit interviews, so data, right? Current feedback. And I think all of these data points together give you a full. But very specifically, what we need to add, I can't answer that right now.
Got it.
So why don't we just, Chris, as we get into the reporting section, I think that's going to be a special point for Katrin to keep an eye out, and I agree.
Yeah.
All right, then if it's okay with everyone to move on to the vote, all in favor to approve Chris's focus areas and deliverables. Frank?
Aye.
Katrin?
Yes.
That is a yes for me. Moving on to our activities calendar. I'd like to make a motion to approve. Is there a second?
I second.
Chris, you want to talk about it for a minute?
Sure. This is something that Yasir and I have worked on. This is always a work in progress. This is not something that's fixed in stone, because we're constantly saying what are we doing, what are we adding, and there's always room to add more. And as we go through the board activity calendar, it keeps us on track for our planning purposes. But again, there's always room to add, and there's a point for every at every board meeting about new items, so we can add these in as we go. So this is just the stripped down version to get us started for the year. And Yasir, anything you want to add with regard to the goals or activity calendar?
No, I think you said it. It's just planned in advance, so we know what our meeting topics are for the month. But of course, it's changeable at every board meeting to add to our next one. So thank you, Chris. Any questions or comments, Frank?
None.
Katrin?
None.
All right, then all in favor to approve the calendar as it is today and ultimately may change. Frank?
Aye.
Katrin?
Yes.
That is a yes for me. Moving on to the approval of the academic year's employee handbook for the school. I'd like to make a motion. Is there a second?
I second.
Chris, go ahead. Actually, Chris, sorry. Changes different from last year? Go ahead.
So this is updated with information that came to us from our legal, and I'm going to let Biggie share a little bit about it. I want to thank her for working with them and making sure that what is listed in here is what we actually do. And so she went back and forth with legal on this and finalized it. So Biggie, a really quick update on what would be like key changes that are in this employee handbook.
There's a lot of updated language in there that doesn't really have completely updated topics, but it's been made more concise and more specific about what we're actually doing in different areas. There are quite a few changes in the area of the employee benefits, because there have been more changes there, which are in the here in the section starting on page 48. So all the medical leaves, the family and pregnancy leave, disability leave, there have been a lot of changes that have been included in this. And then there's also a teleworking policy included, which hopefully we don't need anymore, but in case we would need to go back to a teleworking situation, then it would be clearly defined here how that should work. Other than that, it's really just updated language with regard to things that we've done anyway before, but it's more concise to what we're actually doing and not what was written there before, and we've kind of done, but not always exactly how it was written in the policies here. And the
Thank you,
last
Biggie.
handbook, if I'm not mistaken, was about 4 years old, or even 5 years. So it's really now a nice step forward to have this up to date again to all the legal verbiage that is out there for these specific topics.
Thank you, Biggie. Frank, Katrin, questions, comments?
I can go and see if I'm muted. Just a quick check that we did. Do you usually get the employee handbook update sort of method?
Sorry, Katrin, can you speak up a little bit?
Apologize. Is it better? Hello?
Yeah, can you speak up a little bit, Katrin? Sorry.
Yes. Okay.
I'm not able to hear.
Yeah, I think she's back on mute. Frank, do you have any questions or comments?
No questions, no comments.
Katrin, you back? Yeah, we're having a tough time hearing you, Katrin. Did you get the handbook vetted by legal? Thank you, Katrin.
Yes, absolutely. Back and forth, back and forth, back and forth.
Excellent. Okay. Chris, can we do a vote without hearing Katrin's voice if she just chats it? Yes?
Yes, that will work.
Excellent. Okay. Then let's move on. All in favor to approve the employee handbook? Frank?
Yes.
Katrin? Perfect.
I see
That
it
is-
right there.
That is a yes for me. That might be actually a much easier way to do it. Thank you. All right, moving on to new business. Frank, any new items to add for, I guess, Chris, we're having a meeting the last week of September, a special meeting?
Yes. So this will be, we're readjusting what was asked of us by the CSD on the material revision so that we can meet the next window to get it in. And we would want it either September 27th or September 28th. I already know that Sam is available either one of those days, and we would want to do it if possible, either at 4:30 or 5 o'clock. The reasoning is we have grade level parties that are happening where we go out and we do a little fundraising pitch, and we do meet and greet, and so those are on the same days. So if we could do it at 4:30 in the afternoon, that would be ideal. I think Katrin said that she is not available on the 27th, the Tuesday, but she is available on the 28th. So if we could focus in on that one, would we be able to get a quorum at, let's say, 4:30 on September 28th?
Wednesday, yes.
I am free on both days, so we'll leave it to you, Chris, if you want to organize through email further.
Yep.
Hard.
It sounds like the 28th will work then. We would have quorum because we'd have Sam, Katrin, Frank, and Yasir, and we'll see about Pete. So we might get 5.
Perfect.
Okay. Wednesday, September 28th at 4:30.
But
Chris, how long?
please send around like a
Meeting
placeholder.
invitation.
Otherwise, it's gonna get lost.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You got it.
Chris, how long will the meeting be?
I would guess around about 30 minutes, 30 to 40 minutes. We do need to look through and discuss the data that leads us to the conclusion that we need that material revision, and that needs to be a part of the record. So
Is it possible to do it a little earlier in the day instead of 4:30, like 4?
I mean, I'm available.
Frank, are you okay with that if it's a little bit earlier?
Yeah, as long as it is on the calendar, I can always change around, but I can
Okay.
make quick changes.
Katrin, does that work for you at 4 o'clock?
She's checking. Yeah, she's good.
Okay, then let's go with that. 4 o'clock, and I will send a follow. I'll send a Google Calendar invite.
Perfect. Thank you. All right.
Okay.
If there's nothing further, I would like to make a motion to adjourn the meeting. Do I have a second?
I second.
Oh, no,
she's second.
Katrin beat you. Excellent. All in favor, Frank,
Yes.
Katrin? And that is a yes for me. All right, meeting is adjourned at 8:13 p.m. Thank you, everyone, and we will see you guys in a couple of weeks.